I consider it not only possible but necessary to criticize even if I don't have a fully fleshed out solution. I sometimes pose critiques of things either in my personal life or online, and I'm met with this kind of non engagement with the critique itself in favor of some variation on, well, what would you do differently? And many times I do actually have some sense of an alternative or ideas of what we can try differently, or I just challenge the very premise of needing an alternative in the first place. For example, if someone were to ask me for an alternative to the visa system after I've criticized it, I would simply argue that there doesn't need to be one at all. How we get to that point is, of course, a separate strategic conversation that would need to arise from a level of international solidarity that doesn't currently exist. But that aside, back to the point, you can criticize something without having an alternative. I recently criticized democracy, and I did present an alternative, but it's not recognized or not understood or it doesn't meet some narrow definition of organization. So a minority has reacted as though I opposed organization itself because I opposed one approach to organization. I could have criticized and resisted slavery if I were a slave without knowing the inner workings of the transatlantic system. I could have criticized and resisted feudalism as a medieval peasant without understanding it fully or knowing what would replace it as a system. If I remember correctly, there was a peasant rebellion that resisted their conditions but didn't understand its roots, so they thought the king would be on their side, and the king ended up crushing them. It was a kind of good sir, bad boyar type mindset. I think criticism should evolve beyond shallow analysis and develop a deeper understanding of what it is criticizing in order to generate more effective solutions, because consciousness naturally informs practice. Also, criticizing something doesn't always mean that you're not implicated by it. You criticize society, yet you participate in it. Haha, I'm very clever. I think we should engage more in the degrees of complicity with systems, of course. I'll probably make an extra video on that, because some people take it to either extreme. They either act like you have to completely extricate yourself from participation in society, no fun allowed, or, shrug and proclaim that there is no ethical consumption of the capitalism, and thus you can cross picket lines, cross boycotts, engage in hyperconsumption, and do nothing to check your own contributions to that system. Obviously, two very extreme poles. And there's room for disagreement about the nature of complicity, of course. I have criticisms of the World Cup, but I'm still enjoying watching the game. But other people will probably criticize me for that position and take the position that you just shouldn't watch it at all. That's their choice. I disagree with them. We keep it pushing. As we're on that topic though, something else I've noticed is that people sometimes get so caught up in the criticism of a thing that they cannot think beyond criticizing the thing, or think of any other approaches to that thing, besides the one that is currently manifest. I see this a lot with self-described anti-capitalists. They have so many critiques, so many examples of everything wrong with the system. Critiques that I do share. But when it comes to solutions, so many of them seem to just want to mimic past systems and approaches and reforms. I realize the exercise of imagination is lacking. I think of imagination like a muscle sometimes, and if you're not using it, you're gonna lose it. And you're gonna have trouble making change, because to make change, you have to first envision it. I've realized that the mindset I bring to criticism is not shared by everyone else. I use criticism to open up the space of discourse so that myself and others can bring our insights and eventually co-create solutions that are responsive to those articulated criticisms. But to even get to that point of finding solutions, we have to articulate clear critiques, which means using clear terminology. And that's a problem I think we often have, because words, even the most basic of words, need to be defined clearly in a conversation. A lot of words carry baggage that can either obscure or exaggerate differences between positions. As I pointed out in one of my articles this year, the same words are often used or understood very differently, even between people who claim the same label. Assuming that you share a common understanding when you don't can end up obstructing a fruitful exchange on your differences. And there really can't be any progress in dialogue if you're speaking different languages.